think as I'm listening to you talk, there are so many folks who have called into this show. My own personal birthing experiences, what does diametrically opposed and opposite to each other. One as amazing as one could hope, and one as disastrous as one would pray against. And thankfully,
Mm,
both were successful. But like you, there are so many people who would have benefited if they had help and support. And the fact that you had to say your doula was your sister just speaks to the crazy obstacles that birthing people have to go through just to produce life, right? Let alone what happens
mhm,
after the child is here, and you actually are considering, school, housing, food, education, all of these things that go along with it. And having a
mhm.
robust understanding of what reproductive justice looks like is a very important thing. So let's talk about Love Delivered. What does it do? And I see that you have impacted numerous people. More than 2,000 Black birthing people have been benefited and impacted by this work so far. Over 191,000 people engaged. What does that engagement and support look like?
We have been a part of Mama Glow's Doula Expo every year since she's started it, and we'll be a part of that again this year.
Mm.
We participate in sponsoring webinars. Latham and I do different live chats and interviews to raise awareness about the topic. On both websites, you can find a link, and I believe it's been dropped into the chat for the Birthing While Black Prep Guide, which has a lot of really great information for people, Black birthing people going through this process, questions you should ask, how to advocate, etc. Um, it's having a conversation about something that we typically do not have a conversation about.
Mm.
So many people are, when they're preparing to have a child, there's a lot of focus on what's the baby room going to look like, what kind of
Yep.
stroller am I going to get, will I breastfeed or not, which pump is best. There's not as much conversation in what does my labor look like, how do I
Right.
want it to be, how should it be, how healthy am I, and what can I do, what can't I do. For people who are having C-sections that are planned, sometimes the thought is, well, I'm going in for surgery on such and such a date, and then I'm coming home with the baby. And there
Yep.
isn't thought to what that feels like. How are you going to feel when you come home with this baby? If you've never had a baby before, what is healing from a C-section feel like? And somebody like
Mm.
me, I found out when I was in the middle of it. It wasn't discussed beforehand. And maybe if I had had a doula or someone to talk to about this, or if the medical system had been different, I might have asked more questions and instead of discover as I went along, which was not ideal at all.
I think you know how they say that there's no book for life. There's no guide to help you. That might be true, but there's information that can be shared. Like there's benefits
Yes.
that had we known, some of us who ended up having emergency C-sections, that this is not like just a regular surgery. Like this is like a whole life altering
A whole
situation here.
thing. Yeah.
Like what does it mean to have to sneeze after you've had a C-section, right? What does it mean to
Yeah.
have to, I
Yeah.
mean, these are things that nobody talks about, but that can be awful to have to discover on your own in isolation without the support of people. And when you're Black, one of my biggest challenges as a Black birthing person was that, I mean, well, there were so many. Let me not even pick the one that was the most, but like just the lack of looking at people who not just knew what you were going through as a birthing person, but understood that could give you that, sis, I got you. No, hold
Mm-hmm.
on, I got you. I'm gonna have,
Mm-hmm.
so being able to have these sorts of resources are so important. What are some of the questions that people should be asking and thinking about as they're preparing for birth, particularly if they're birthing while Black? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about ahead of time, as opposed to a lot of us who figure it out afterwards and just whisper campaign it to our sister friends and folks who are going to be having babies later?
Well, when you are in that process, you find out that you're pregnant, you might have a GYN that you've been going to just for the maintenance of things.
Mm.
When you're going to have a baby, it's a different relationship. So, is your current GYN an OB/GYN? Is it an OB that you have a bond with? When you go in for your
Right.
checkups, is there good rapport? Do you have great conversations? Do they ask you things about yourself, or is it all very perfunctory? So you have to look at that relationship, because this is going to be you bringing another life into the world. You kind of don't want it to be with a stranger or somebody that doesn't know you. And because health insurance can make things complicated, and then because we're not necessarily taught to advocate for ourselves, I think sometimes people feel, well, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I'm just going to go with
Right.
Dr. So and so, even though they feel uncomfortable. When we've done these conversations, I've heard moms say, well, I asked the doctor a question and I didn't like the answer that I received. So I got a second opinion and switched doctors.
Mm,
That's something that you might have to do.
right.
Understanding what type of birth can you have. If someone is saying that because of this reason and this reason, you should have a C-section, if this is brand new information to you that you've never heard before and you're unsure of it, then you go find out if that really is true. 2 years ago, I had someone tell me that I would likely need knee replacement surgery somewhere in the next 5 years, but I would be the one to decide when that would happen. And someone said to me, oh, you should get a second opinion just to make sure that the
Mm.
situation isn't more dire than that. And that never would have occurred to me. And I went and got
Wow,
the
me
second
either.
opinion within insurance. I got a second opinion, and they corroborated exactly what that other person said. So then I felt so much more comfortable with going through with the plan that was in place. But me, years ago, when I was giving birth, I probably would not have questioned, and I just would have accepted the first thing that I heard. So I
Wow.
encourage people to ask questions until they feel comfortable. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's so important, and particularly because when you are pregnant and this is a pregnancy that you plan to keep, time is of the essence, right? There are so many doctors who won't
Mhm.
begin seeing you. If they haven't seen you up until a certain point of the pregnancy, it's difficult to find one later on. So we have to be bold in our questioning. We have to follow up on those, that little voice in the head that's like, something about that don't feel right. We actually have to follow up on that in ways while you're pregnant that you might not in this with the same urgency
Mhm.
if you're not pregnant. Not saying we should not do that when we're not pregnant, but we will often give things some time, which is a problem in our community. But with pregnancy, you absolutely cannot do that. And then when we're thinking also about the disparities that so many of us experience when it comes to our maternal health, and if you're looking just in New York City alone, just in New York City, Black women are 8 times more likely than white women to die from a pregnancy related cause, and nearly 3 times more likely to experience severe maternal morbidity than are white women. So before we can even get to a baseline of health, we recognize that this disparity speaks to the fact that there is something about our experience as Black birthing people in these medical
Mhm.
institutions that is not being seen or valued. And this is why having these conversations is so very important. If I am a pregnant person and I'm like, ooh, I hear Lisa Price. I used to use her products. I still use her products. I like her. Okay, I trust her. She's a trusted member of the community because we believe in trusted voices. And I'm hearing this, and I myself am pregnant. How do I access this information? Is there a website I go to? What do I do to get connected to the campaign? Because I got sister friends right now, Lisa Price, they in their 40s and they're pregnant again. And we like, ooh, that was not the plan. We supposed to be going to Essence Festival. What is happening right now? But they need support and help. And there's so much more in terms of resources that is available to them now than there were available when we were having our first kids 16, 17 years ago. How can people connect with the campaign in meaningful ways, both within New York, and is there an outside of New York option?
Yes, so you just go to the either of our websites. So you could go to the Carol's Daughter website, and I believe it's /love delivered. But again, it's in the chat. And then mamaglowfoundation.org. And there's information, like I said, the Birthing While Black prep guide is there that you can download. I think it's about 30 some odd pages, lots of great information. There
Wow.
is information on how to get a doula in your area. Sometimes insurance covers doulas, sometimes it doesn't, but having a doula doesn't have to be a financially burdening situation. Some of the work
Mm.
that we do with Mama Glow is to help fund people getting doulas. So there is a way to qualify for that. within Mama Glow. And the thing that helps with a doula, because people don't necessarily understand the difference between a midwife and a midwife is someone who can deliver the baby as long as there isn't a need for medical intervention, such as surgery or the administration of certain drugs and things like that. A doula is someone who is assisting in the birth and assisting you. Latham often refers to it as having a producer or an event planner for your birth. And
I
even though
love
that can
it.
sound like, it's something frivolous, it really isn't, because when you are in that space, the only thing that you should be focusing on is birthing the child,
Mm.
not anything else. You shouldn't have to worry about the temperature in the room. Are there enough ice chips? Do you want a blanket over you or take it off because you're too hot? You should just make requests and have someone able to answer those things for you. Your partner who's with you, their focus is going to be, she's uncomfortable. How do I make it stop? How do I make her feel better? And they might not be able to do that. And the doula is that third party that is not invested in the same way in what's happening.
Mm.
They can see clearly. They know what the other side of this looks like. And they can talk you through it, but then also assure your partner everything is okay.
Right.
This is what
Yeah.
happens. Just breathe with her, hold her hand, say this, do that. Those are not things that you learn, like you sometimes need someone to help you through that. I remember when I was giving birth to my firstborn, I told my husband that I was leaving the hospital because I was done. And he said, "But you can't leave because you're having a baby." I said, "Not today."
Wow.
And
Where were
I
you
was
going, Lisa
serious.
Price? What did you have
I
to
was
do?
I was catching a cab. Like, he had to call a nurse because I started to like sit up like I was going to remove things, but I was delirious. Because I was done.
Wow.
I'd never done that before. And you
Right.
need that person to just be like, "Look, you can't go anywhere. It's going to be okay.
Right.
This is going to end. It doesn't last." Because
Right.
when you're in it, it feels like it's not going to end.
Yeah. Now, as you're talking, I'm remembering birthing my child. We had a water birth. Midwives do. It was wonderful. And I remember my husband. First time having a kid, and he was biting onto his knuckles so hard because trying to like pacing and just biting. And I was like, is he about to break the skin? He just, I mean, and there was, so his ability to help me think rationally was impacted by the fact that he was having his first baby too, right? And we often
Mm-hmm.
forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's since talked about the fact that, men don't have groups like women have where they talk about, we
Right.
talk about birth, we talk about a lot of these things. Men don't have,
Right.
hey dog, how's your postpartum depression happen? Because men have postpartum depression as well, but they don't have spaces where, the first baby my husband held was our son in terms of holding a newborn. Whereas I had been to baby showers, I had been in sister circles, pass
Mm-hmm.
me that baby, so just even the ability for our partners to show up can be so impacted because they too are having their child as that child is passing through the person who's doing the birthing.